Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This month, Zero Gravity Lesbian Shenanigans. This is episode 492. I am Nobilis Reed. Our author, C Lenz, is a writer, scientist, and odd little thing. She has been previously published in AE, the Canadian Science Fiction Review, Metaphorosis, and Fairfield Microscribes. She was an honorable mention in the 2023 Hamilton Grit-Lit Short Story Contest. She lives with her partner in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Our narrator is Vivienne Ferrari, a favorite of this podcast. You can find her most recent audiobook narration, Death and the Last Vampire, on Audible and Amazon. Link in the show notes. Remember that you can get even more erotic audio if you join the Patreon campaign at patreon.com/nobilis. In addition, you will get access to the podcast Discord and my undying gratitude. Here we go.
The Fishbowl by C Lenz. This is a bit public, isn't it? As public as it gets, babe, Lily replied. The small plexiglass dome, affectionately known as the Fishbowl, jutted out of the space station, letting them float above Earth. The observation deck was theoretically available to all employees, but most didn't spend their time off looking at a planet they may never set foot on again. All those billionaires still rich enough to live on the planet can see us. My parents aren't billionaires and they live down there, Cass said. Well, maybe they shouldn't have kicked you out. Then they wouldn't be subjected to this show. Lily ducked her head down. In zero gravity, she had to keep her arms wrapped around Cass's thighs to keep herself in position. She nibbled the lips of Cass's entrance, gently at first, before nibbling and tugging at the soft skin. Cass let out a soft gasp. Lily finally stopped teasing. Her tongue plunged deep into Cass. The entwined women floated free, Cass arching her back as she moaned in pleasure, the stars outside swirling around her as they orbited the observation window. Cass curled into a C to look at Lily. Her thick black hair pulsed like the graceful swim of a jellyfish as her head bobbed, her tongue dipping in and out of Cass. It reminded Cass of the first time they'd seen each other. They'd been passing on opposite sides of a tunnel, Cass's shift climbing down to the asteroid to begin mining as Lily's came back up. The two crews floated in a single file, flowing easily along with the gentlest push off the ladder rungs. They all looked at the boots of the miner above them or focused on the ladder. The tunnel, the uniforms, the equipment lining the wall. It was all a blur. A dull, anesthetizing sameness that would never change, never improve. But Cass had seen that hair, spreading out around Lily's head like a dark halo, before streaming out behind her with each bound forward, only for the tendrils to unfurl again when she slowed. Oh my God, Cass moaned. Lily moaned something back in response, the words translated into flickers of her tongue and rolling of her lips, the hum of her voice vibrating from inside Cass. Meeting someone on the opposite shift was not easy. The next few days, as the rest of her co-workers wearily kept their eyes forward, Cass had arched her back and neck almost as much as she did now, almost in a downward dog position as she pawed blindly at the rungs of the ladder. The opposite crew had drifted by her like a stream of people on Tinder, if they all wore spacesuits and took pictures of the back of their heads. All of them looked the same to her. All except Lily, who kept her soft hair floating free whenever she could. The first few times, Lily had glided by without seeing Cass. Cass had started clearing her throat when she passed, or letting a Kevlar glove slip noisily across the inner workings of the space station. Lily pulled away, her breath still hot on Cass's inner thighs. Her gaze flitted up Cass's body before they locked eyes. Lily's mouth followed the path her eyes had taken, kissing the soft skin of Cass's belly, her lips working their way up. The first time they had made eye contact across that transfer tunnel, Lily's smile had shone like the sun. If meeting someone was difficult, it was nearly impossible to build a relationship. Only one rest day lined up out of their 4 per month, and it was hard not to spend most of those days sleeping or staring at a screen or otherwise inert. You could still communicate through the company chat service, but given the number of banned words, the conversation was stilted. Blocking sexual words was reasonable. The mining station was technically a workplace after all. But given that it was the only allowed means of private conversation, it did make things difficult. The real problems came when trying to talk about anything of substance. Past trauma, current struggles, any strong emotions whatsoever. The chat app would flag anything that seemed too sensitive, too provocative, anything that it deemed likely to cause interpersonal friction. Lily climbed Cass's body, her mouth exploring her hips, her belly, her breasts, and her neck, until they were face to face. Her fingers tangled in Cass's hair, pulling Cass's face to hers as their bodies drifted apart. With an impatient moan, Cass grabbed Lily's lower back, running her hands down her ass and thighs, pulling the two of them closer. Wrapping one leg around Lily for stability, she guided Lily's member inside her, sighing as they locked together in the void. With Cass's palms and Lily's feet pressed into the plexiglass dome for leverage, the two rocked back and forth in a gentle rhythm, like a kelp forest drifting just under ocean waves. As stilted as their conversations were, Cass still treasured each short line as it came, each new thread she could try to weave together into a picture of Lily. She would devour every word and send a reply before even consciously thinking the words she was typing. Despite that, the conversations moved slowly, Cass and Lily drifting towards each other in small increments. Cass would finish her shift and reply to a message Lily had sent 12 hours ago, at the end of her last one. Or Lily would steal away during a break and send a string of thoughts to a sleeping Cass, who would wake up to a dozen one-line messages that she would scramble to reply to before her shift. And then there were moments like this, where Cass and Lily could see each other perfectly, where they could speak totally unguarded, where they didn't have to worry about their closeness causing an uneven, uninclusive workplace. Lily pushed harder, her arms wrapped around Cass. Cass's arms shook with effort as she pushed the ceiling, the stars away from her, pushing herself down onto Lily. They breathed in unison, sighing ragged gasps. "Oh, God, I love you," Cass cried out, her voice cracking. "I love you too," Lily replied. The fingers of both her hands wound through Cass's hair as she pulled Cass's mouth to hers. Lily clutched Cass's back, her fingernails digging into her skin. Cass didn't notice, lost in the motion of Lily thrusting in and out of her. She let out another cry, this one without words, as waves of pleasure surged through her. Her hands tensed against the plexiglass and then went slack. Without Cass bracing against the opposite side of the dome, Lily's feet floated off the clear surface, her toes curling. Lily and Cass hung in space, touching nothing in the universe but each other. A fixed point that the station slowly rotated around. Cass's legs were still wrapped around Lily, keeping them attached. Their arms were tangled as their two bodies clung together. They were silent as the stars for long minutes. "Lily?" Cass finally said. I have to tell you something." Lily's eyes fluttered open. Her head rose from where it was nestled in the crook of Cass's neck. I think I'm pregnant, Cass said. Lily frowned. That's very unlikely, she replied. But not totally impossible, Cass said. Right? It's very unlikely, Lily repeated. But what makes you think you're pregnant? I haven't had my period since before the last time I saw you, Cass said. That was more than a month ago. Zero gravity, weird hours, all that can fuck with you, right? Yeah, but this would be the first time it has. Lily sighed and then tucked her head back onto Cass's shoulder. So what now? She asked, even as she guessed the answer. Fetuses didn't grow right in zero gravity. The company would allow Cass to go back to Earth for the length of the pregnancy, pausing the debt she owed them for moving her into space. She could come back once she'd had her baby, possibly leaving it with her parents, but Lily knew that most women didn't. They stayed on Earth with their child, accepting the massive financial penalties they incurred, creating a debt that their child would inherit. Lily would take on the same penalties if she could. She would follow Cass to Earth to raise their child. But she couldn't see that future. The company would cancel the contract of a pregnant woman for a massive fee. A single mother could get state-subsidized housing in exchange for having her wages severely garnished. Now that Cass was going to have a baby, now that she was conforming to the expectations of her assigned gender at birth, in terms of not just reproducing, but also struggling in the correct way, she would be accepted back on Earth with open arms. But a trans woman? The Earth was more hostile than the vacuum of space, and the company more than that. A tear welled, forming a veil over her vision. She shut her eyes tight to cut it off. Tiny globes of water sparkled in the air like diamonds. I won't do it, Cass said. Lily's eyes snapped open. What? I won't make another person who has to live this way. They're going to come out of the womb as an indentured servant. I won't give them to this world, this system. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way, Lily said. Maybe your parents could help, or... No, Cass shook her head. Then they'll be indebted to them. Hell, I'll be indebted to them after they kicked me out. After they made it so my only choice was to come. Shay, Lily said, cutting Cass off as her voice broke. I'm sorry, Cass said. Her voice shook. She took a few deep breaths. I don't care that I'll be stuck in space forever. It's what I signed up for. I chose this. And I did meet you, so I'm happy. She smiled, and then her eyes hardened. The corners of her lips somehow seemed sharp. Lily could see a fierce, protective mother in Cass's features, a woman who would do anything to protect her child, including not creating them. But I will not feed a child into this meat grinder. It won't be this way forever, Lily said. You don't know that our kid or grandkid won't have a great life someday. When you think about it, we have to have ancestors that survived the Black Plague, right? That would have been one of the worst things to experience, but eventually things got better. Eventually your kids or your kids' kids will be all right. Would you have a child during the Black Plague if you had a choice? Or if you knew that was what their life would be like? Cass asked. I don't care about my theoretical descendants. I care about this child. But Cass, Lily said, what will you do? I'll think of something, Cass said. I'll starve myself or let my oxygen tank get too low for longer than I should. I'll take some dangerous drugs, something that fucks up my system. Okay, Lily nodded. I understand. I'll do whatever I can to help. The two of them slid apart. It would be another work cycle before they saw each other again. They took in each other's bodies in the moonlight filling the fishbowl, trying to memorize every detail. A net of dark blood wrapped around Lily's member, glistening in the moonlight. A thick red ribbon of vaginal fluid marbling with menses stretched between them before breaking, creating a burst of glistening crimson orbs like a galaxy of red dwarfs. Cass gasped, and then let out a giggle of relief, shaking her head at her own anxieties. She'd worked herself up over nothing. Lily looked down and snickered. I told you it was unlikely. The end.
And that's our story. If you'd like to get an ad-free version of this podcast, head to patreon.com/nobilis. As a supporter, you will have access to a personal RSS feed that you can drop into your podcatcher. And if you want bonus content every month, bump up your support to $3 a month. Currently, patrons at the $3 level are enjoying a brand new story. We Hire Humans. Remember to pick up Monster Whisperer Second Class in your favorite ebook retailer or on the Riverdale Avenue Books website. Or pick up the audiobook on Audible, Amazon, or Apple. Your support will help ensure this series continues. You have been listening to the Nobilis Erotica podcast. Theme music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.